the African American congregation, and I tried to sing with the gospel choir. And I was the only white face among them. And they kept telling me, you just don't have any soul. We've come to the end of another church year. It's kind of hard, you know, the way the calendar. We mark time by pulling pages off the calendar, and we go into a new year expecting new experiences and new activities. But the church marks time differently. And we have a pattern of events that repeat themselves every year. As we begin the new year with Advent, we change our colors. And maybe, here's a question before I go on. Does anybody have a tabletop Advent wreath at home? Some people light Advent candles at home, and if there's anybody has a small tabletop, a ring about this size, and we put the 4 candles in. I thought, I'll see if I can scare one up so we have it.
I got Advent wreath.
Excuse me?
I got one in the nursing home.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we'll steal the one from that. But anyway, this whole season of Advent is to remind us, as this gospel did, that we're not in control, that we need to be ready, that God is coming, but we don't know when. But one of the things that I want to flag here, Jim said maybe I just needed to deliver a hellfire and brimstone sermon this morning to make warm us up. Know that God is love, and there is not going to be hellfire and brimstone, because God's mercy and justice, God's justice is always a justice, judgment of love, always. So if you grew up with hellfire and brimstone, try and put that out of your mind. I've had a go-round these past several days with my cable company, reminding me again that I'm not in control of everything, of anything. From what I was told initially to where I am now with the channels I want, another $150 has gone out the window. The world we live in and the life we live come at a cost. And these are the little things over which we have no control. Never mind our government's foreign policy or healthcare policy or businesses that control so much of our lives. So the gospel is telling us too, we have no control. We've got several changes in our worship, obviously. Now I'm wearing purple, which is one of my better colors. And we're changing the Eucharistic prayer. Our hymns are different. And we're going forward, we'll be reading from Luke's Gospel. The Lucan Gospel is traditionally known as the Gospel of women and children because it highlights the story of Mary, the Annunciation, and the Nativity. Tells us the story of Mary and Martha. It notes in chapter 8, go look it up, that how women bankroll Jesus' mission, and then contains some of the best known parables and stories that Jesus tells. Advent is about a lot of things. It's about hope and dread and longing and fear and salvation and judgment, our beginning and our end. It's also about waiting. It's about the one who, for us and for our salvation, came down from heaven by the power of the Holy Spirit, as we say in the words of the Creed. So what do we make with these, of these rather hard lessons that we get today? Are they predicting something that's going to happen, or helping us to make meaning out of what has happened? They are not predictions of the future. I don't like these lessons any more than you do, I'm guessing. This is called apocalyptic writing, and it's written to a community under siege, in distress. It's a language of global catastrophes and distress among nations. And this form of writing emerged after the fall of the temple in Jerusalem, and the fledgling Christian community was thrown out of Palestine and moved on, and people were afraid. And it just sounded, this gospel was the way they felt about how the world was turning upside down. About 25 years ago, there was a Left Behind series of books about Tim LaHaye was one of the authors, and I don't remember the other one. But it was, the focus of the books was on the end times and how the great turmoil that was going to happen when the forces of good and evil collided, and Jesus came back. Those books fostered fear and desperation that many people were going to get left behind. Please know that God does not leave any of us behind. As I said, God's judgment is always a judgment of love, and Jesus welcomes all to himself. Today's gospel, Jesus challenges us to name and welcome what's happening right now, the chaos of our lives. I was thinking about this gospel, and it kind of sounds like our own time. I thought of roaring seas and wondering is he talking about sea levels rising? And I said, in distress among nations, is he referring to the wars in the Middle East and Ukraine and the ignored strife in Sudan? And people fainting in fear. You know, my imagination got a little ahead of me, but I was wondering if those were the politicians cozying up to the president-elect. But needless to say, these words have been applicable in many, many generations. And it's tempting to make literal connections, and it's also tempting to use Jesus' words to predict the future. But what God is pointing out to us, what the gospel is pointing out to us, is that we are living in a time of difficulty, in a time of stress, and that we are called to wait and to be patient. And it's darn hard. Even when we don't know we're waiting and what we're waiting for. Certainly the end of the Advent season is Christmas, and we're waiting for the birth of the baby Jesus, but we're also waiting for the healing of the world. We're waiting for a transformation of the systems and the corporations that seem to have control over the world and inhibit people's growth and people's livelihoods. We're waiting for peace in the world. And we're waiting because that's what we're called to do. Because waiting often seems like a waste of time. But there's a story I ran across, which I thought speaks to our waiting today, about a group of Jewish students, obviously Jewish men, who are preparing to become rabbis. And day after day they read and studied the scriptures and pored over the texts and various interpretations of the law, and prayed and regularly and together. And then their teacher told them, the full experiences of God can never be planned or achieved. There are spontaneous moments of grace, sort of usually accidental. And the students were just dumbfounded. They couldn't believe that that's what they were hearing. If it's experiencing God, having experience of God is accidental, why are we doing all this praying and reading and studying? Why are we doing all these spiritual practices? And the rabbi replied, so that we may be as accident prone as possible. So we may be ready. So we're in that community that's waiting for a lot of things. Not the least is the fixing of the furnace. But we keep on serving our brothers and sisters around us here in this community and paying attention to what God may reveal. We are making ourselves accident prone as possible, waiting for God in our midst. Next week, everybody wear gloves.